Hello students, now you're going to look at a research article and see the components that we talked about in the previous video. In this research article, the title of the article is Dependent Personality Disorder and Physical Abuse. Now that just so happens to also be the topic of the article, because in research articles, the topic is always mentioned at some point in the title. And this is a very short, concise title for a research article that only mentions the topic. The topic and the title are the same thing in this article. That doesn't happen for all titles, but it does for this one. Now, looking at this article, you can see at the very top of the article right here, this right here is the name of the journal that published this article. The name of the journal is Psychiatry Research. You can also see the name of the journal here. If I scroll to the next page of the article, at the very top, I see the authors, the name of the journal, the volume number, the date, and the page numbers of the journal. You can see that on each page. Here we have the same thing, but we don't have the names of the authors. We just have the name of the journal, the volume number, the date, and the page numbers. Down here, we see the authors. So our first author is listed. This is the lead author. And this little A right here tells us, if we look down here to this A right here, this is where this author works, at the University Department of Psychiatry. Somewhere, here's the address, and then France. The next author, Julie Cormier, this is where Julie works. Department of Psychiatry in France. Okay, and then we have our last author, and here's where our last author works, in France. All right, so those are our three authors. Now, when we look at the names of the authors on the next page, we can see G. Loas et al. That is Loas, the last name of the first author. The G is the initial of the first author. And et al. Means the others, and the others. Rather than put all of the names again, they just list the first author and then and others. And others, the et al. Is actually Latin, meaning and others. So you'll see, if you scroll down, each page of the article has that same information. Then, coming down a little further, over here we have the article history. This means that the authors originally submitted their paper in March of 2008, and then they submitted it again after making some revisions in June of 2009, and then it was accepted in June of 2009, but those dates are not the dates of the publication. This is just the dates of the history of the paper. To know the date of the publication, you have to look over here with the name of the journal, the volume number, the page numbers. You'll find the year of the publication here. So if you ever have a question about when was this article published, be careful, don't look in the article history. Look for the date that's next to the rest of this information. Underneath the article history, we have keywords. Keywords are important words in the article that you could use if you were doing a search for an article like this You could use these words to find this article. And next, we have the abstract of the article. The abstract comes first. It's not considered the body of the article. It's a summary of what's going to be in the body of the article. So it's important whenever you have a research article that you need to do something with, it's very important that you read the entire abstract. In this abstract, the very first sentence says what the aim of the research is about. It says the aim of this study was to test the hypothesis that the likelihood of physical spousal abuse is increased in dependent personality disorder compared to other personality disorders. Then, after the authors stated what their purpose or their aim of their study was, they immediately began talking about the sample. The sample is the group of subjects that were studied in the research. So this sample consisted of 305 subjects, and then it goes on to explain what the authors did to conduct their research. They actually explain it throughout the whole middle of this abstract. Explains that they divided the subjects into groups, and they had some various results within each group. And then at the very end of the abstract, you can see this last sentence. It says these results suggest, first, that the dependent personality disorder subjects are at high risk of physical abuse by their spouses, and second, that this relationship was found also for the two other cluster C personality disorders, as well as for borderline personality disorder. So remember, at the beginning of the abstract, they said that the aim was to test the hypothesis that the likelihood of physical spousal abuse is increased in dependent personality disorder. And then they say at the end here that these results suggest first that the dependent personality disorder subjects are at high risk of physical abuse by their spouses. So that means that this hypothesis that they had, that they mentioned at the beginning, that they were actually correct, that it was confirmed that it was true. And of course, then they also discuss a little bit more about that. Scrolling down, looking at the introduction, the authors first talk about what other studies have done regarding this topic of dependent personality disorder and abuse. And then they start talking here after several paragraphs. They talk about their article. The present article is the article that they're writing right here that you're reading. So then they say the present article focuses on victim dependency. So then they continue to talk about their topic, and they're comparing their study with other studies that have been done on the topic, and comparing it and saying things that should have been done better or weren't thorough enough that we need to learn more from. For example, talking about Watson's study. Watson's study had several limitations. So then they listed these limitations, showing that there's gaps in the research that need to be done better. Then at the very end of the introduction, they say the aim of the present study was to test the hypothesis that the likelihood of physical spousal abuse is increased in dependent personality disorder compared to other personality disorders. So now they have once again talked about the aim of their study. Remember that you saw it at the beginning of the abstract, which is often where they put where the author will put the aim or the hypothesis, and then also at the end of the introduction. Next, the authors talk about the methods. They sometimes will break the method section into smaller pieces. This method section is section number 2, and they've broken it into smaller pieces. Here we have 2.1, which is about the subjects. And then coming up here to the next side of the page is 2.2, which is about the procedures and measures. Then we have the 2.3, the statistical analysis, which is how they analyzed the data. And then we have a table, and the table offers comparisons of the 3 groups that they put the subjects in. And then we get down to the next section, which is section 3, which is the results. In the results, they simply discuss the data. As you can see, as you're looking through the results, there's lots of numbers and statistical information and percentages, but there's not a lot of explaining what those numbers mean. That's because they're not going to explain that until you get to the next section, which is the discussion. When you get to the discussion, the first results they talk about are usually the main results, the most important results of the study. So as you can see here, one of the main results of the study, taking into account the comparisons between these 3 groups that they put the subjects in, is that dependent personality disorder were characterized by higher rates of somatic and psychiatric morbidity than subjects without personality disorder. So then they're going to go on. They keep talking about the different results that they got, and they're explaining them. Oftentimes, in the discussion section, when they talk about the results, they will compare their results to other studies that were done and the results that the other studies got. And they'll even talk about what's different about their study. To our knowledge, this is the first study reporting a significant association between dependency and physical abuse. So they're explaining why their study is different. But they also explain some things that have been reported in the literature that relate to their study and how their study is similar to other people's study. Okay, and then we get towards the end of the article here, and they're discussing some of their findings and some of their conclusions. And then at the very end of this article, they talk about the limitations. The limitations would be the things that could be better next time. If we did this study again, how could we do this study better? And then finally, at the very end, this is after the very last paragraph, you can see there's a list of references. And this list of references is all of the other authors that were mentioned inside of this paper. So you can see here is Bornstein 1993, and here's Bornstein 1993. We have Watson 1997. Down here is listed Watson 1997. So all of the other authors that the author mentioned in the article are listed in the references.